Hello, everyone. We have all been taught to fear the fall. We imagine it as a great cataclysmic event, a sudden plunge into darkness from a dizzying height. We are told to brace for impact, to prepare for the shattering pain of hitting rock bottom. We build our lives around avoiding that abyss. But what if the greatest danger to your soul isn't the fall itself? What if the most perilous moment in your existence is not when you are broken and bleeding in the valley, but when you are standing comfortably on the plateau, admiring the view, convinced that you are finally safely doing okay? What if the deadliest enemy isn't the one who screams challenges in your face, but the one who whispers that you no longer need to fight at all? This isn't just a psychological theory, it is a cosmic law, and to understand it, we must travel beyond the veil of the mortal world to the celestial realms and listen to the story of an angel named Zuriel, the Blade of Dawn, whose greatest battle was fought not against a legion of demons, but against the deceptively soft enemy of his own peace. Zuriel was a being forged in divine light and righteous fire. His wings, vast and radiant, had cast shadows. The hilt of his sword, forged from a dying star, was worn smooth by his grip through 1,000 years of conflict. He was a veteran of the ethereal wars, a celebrated champion of the heavenly host. His name was a song of victory on the lips of seraphim, and a curse hissed in the dying breaths of fiends. He had faced down Abaddon's hordes at the Onyx Gate, and held the line against the tide of shadows during the night of falling stars. Where others saw chaos and despair, Zuriel saw a glorious divine purpose. He thrived in the storm, his spirit soaring in the righteous fury of combat. For him, the clang of celestial steel against demonic claws was the sweetest music, the only true affirmation. It was loud, grotesque, and unmistakable. It roared, it clawed, it sought to devour the light, and he was its master. Our story begins not in the heat of such a battle, but in its serene aftermath. The war for the Meridian sector was over. A particularly vicious strain of chaos, a legion led by the demon prince Zaphon, had been shattered and driven back into the abyss. Zuriel had delivered the final, decisive blow, cleaving the prince's obsidian armor and scattering his essence to the cosmic winds. Now, heaven celebrated, ethereal light pulsed through the crystalline streets of the Silver City. Choirs of angels sang epics of Zuriel's valor. He stood on the highest celestial ramparts, looking out over a cosmos now quiet and orderly, his own light burning brighter than ever from the adoration and victory. He felt a sense of profound completion. The war was won. The threat was neutralized. His purpose for the moment was fulfilled. He was more than okay, he was triumphant. His commander, the Archangel Michael, approached him, his own light a steady, ancient flame compared. Michael's eyes, which had witnessed the birth of galaxies, held a deep, unnerving calm. "Your victory was magnificent, Zuriel." Michael's voice resonated, not with booming pride, but with a quiet gravity. "The hosts are in your debt. The balance is restored." Zuriel inclined his head, a gesture of respect, but his spirit was brimming with his own achievement. It was the will of the Almighty Commander. I was but the instrument. The words were humble, but the tone was not. It was the rehearsed humility of the victor, the perfunctory nod to a higher power from a being who, in his heart, felt the full intoxicating weight of his own strength. Michael gazed out at the star fields, a faint line of concern etching his timeless features. An instrument must be carefully maintained, especially it must be cleaned of the grime of battle, but also protected from the rust of idleness. Zuriel's brilliant smile was unwavering. "I am far from idle, Commander. I am vigilant. My blade is ever ready." Michael turned to face him fully. "Is it the loudest wars are not the only wars, Zuriel? A demon with a legion is a threat you can see. You can meet its charge, parry its blow. But a demon who offers you a soft cushion instead of a sharp sword, that is a different kind of enemy. There is a new assignment for you, a period of quiet watchfulness. You are to be the guardian of the silent gate." Zuriel's triumphant spirit faltered for the first time. The silent gate, it was a minor celestial outpost, a symbolic doorway that hadn't seen a whisper of conflict in eons. It was a post for apprentices, for young angels learning the discipline of patience. It was, in his mind, a retirement post. The silent gate, he asked, unable to keep the disbelief from his voice. Commander, with respect, my place is on the front lines. The enemy will regroup. There are other sectors, other battles to be won. The enemy is always regrouping, Michael said, his gaze piercing. But they do not. Sometimes they seek to poison the well within. Your victory has made you a symbol, Zuriel, a shining beacon, and the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. Your new enemy will not be a legion, it will be the shadow you now cast. Your assignment is to stand watch, to be still, to listen not to the trumpets of war, but to the silence in between. This is not a lesser duty, it is a greater one. Zuriel wanted to argue, to protest that his strength was being wasted, but one does not argue with the Archangel Michael. He bowed, his form rigid with contained pride. As you command, he accepted the post. But in his heart he saw it not as a sacred duty, but as a slight, an inexplicable, frustrating demotion after his greatest triumph. He was being sent to a quiet corner of the cosmos to rust while others fought the glorious battles. He was being put on a shelf, but he reasoned he could handle it. After all he had endured, a period of quiet would be easy. He was doing okay. In fact, he was doing better than okay, and that was the beginning of his fall. The silent gate was exactly as mundane as he had feared. It was not a grand structure of celestial marble and gold, but a simple, shimmering archway of woven light, set in a tranquil, forgotten corner of the ethereal plane. Its purpose was to monitor the faint psychic reverberations from the mortal realm, to act as an early warning system for spiritual decay. For centuries, it had reported nothing but the quiet hum of existence. Zuriel's duty was to simply be present, his holy aura reinforcing the gate's wards, his senses attuned to any dissonance. But there was no dissonance. There was only silence, a vast, unending, celestial silence. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The songs of his victory faded into a distant echo, the adrenaline of battle, the substance upon which... At first he performed his duties with meticulous precision. He paced the perimeter, he inspected the seals. He focused his divine senses, listening, watching, but he saw and heard nothing. His mind, accustomed to the complex strategies of warfare, was left with nothing to occupy it, and so it turned inward. He began to replay his past glories. He would stand for hours, lost in the memory of his he would relive the cheers of the heavenly host, the feeling of their adoration washing over him. These memories were a warm, intoxicating nectar. They were so much more vivid, so much more real than the crushing monotony of his current reality. He was a warrior, a champion. What was he doing here, guarding an echo? It was in this state of restless boredom, of pride nursing its wounds, that the first whisper came. It was a thought that felt entirely like his own. For you have earned this rest. Zuriel, after all you have done, you deserve a moment of peace. Asterisk, the thought was pleasant. It was reasonable. It felt true he had earned it. Why stand when he could sit? The gate was secure. Nothing had happened here in 10,000 years. He found a perch on a floating crystalline rock, his posture relaxing from a soldier's rigid attention to a lure. But he was watching from a distance, with a mind already drifting back to the grand theater of his memories. The second whisper followed a few weeks later. Faith's duty is beneath you. A lesser angel could do this. Michael does not understand your strength, your value. He is wasting your talents. Asterisk, this thought was not as pleasant. It had a bitter edge. It was the voice of resentment. It fed his bruised... He began to see Michael's command not as a test of discipline, but as an act of jealousy or incompetence. He, Zuriel, the Blade of Dawn, was being sidelined. His great power was being allowed to atrophy in this silent backwater. This thought created a tiny crack in his devotion, a fissure of dissent that separated him, ever so slightly, from the unified will of the host. He began to neglect the small the hourly reinforcement of the inner ward, a simple act of channeling his light into the gate's matrix, seemed redundant. He started doing it every few hours. Then once a day, the gate's shimmering light, once blindingly bright from his constant attention, dimmed to a soft, sleepy glow. He told himself it made no difference. The wards were ancient and powerful on their own. His contribution was a mere formality. He was still on duty. It came as he was gazing from his perch towards the distant swirling nebula where the great wars were still being fought. He could almost hear the faint psychic echo of battle, and a deep longing ached within him. The whisper said, "Fay, just for a moment, Turn your full attention away. Look at the real war. See what your brothers are doing. What harm can a moment's distraction do here, in this place of perfect peace? Asterisk, he knew it was a breach of, but the pull was irresistible. He wanted to feel the thrill of battle again, even vicariously. It was only for a moment. He closed his eyes, not to meditate or pray, but to project his consciousness outward across the cosmos, toward the distant thunder of war. He left the silent gate entirely to its own devices. In his mind he was once again Zuriel, the blade of dawn, soaring through legions of foes, his sword a comet of... He was home. He was not watching the gate. And in that moment of triumphant distraction, a shadow fell upon the silent gate. It wasn't a charging demon or a fiery meteor. It was a subtle thing, like a drop of ink in a glass of pure water. A tiny, almost imperceptible fluctuation in the psychic hum, a single dissonant note in the celestial symphony. It was the demon, Lethargos, the whisperer, the master of spiritual entropy. He did not come with fire and claws. He came with an idea, the idea that had been seeding itself in Zuriel's mind for months. The idea of good enough. Lethargos did not attack the gate. He seeped through it, through the wards that were slightly dimmer, through the matrix that hadn't been reinforced, through the spirit. He was a creature of apathy, a being of quiet decay. His power was not in destruction, but in unraveling. He passed through the silent gate and into the channels that connected the celestial realm to the mortal plane. His target was not an army or a city, but a single human soul, a soul of profound potential, a future prophet whose light was destined to push back a coming darkness on it, a soul that had been assigned to Zuriel's remote protection, a fact the angel had deemed insignificant, a footnote in his grander responsibilities. Lethargos did not seek to corrupt the soul with grand temptations of power or wealth. His method was far more insidious. He found the human a good and honest man in a moment of contentment. The man had just finished a fine day's work. His family was healthy, his business was he was, for all intents and purposes, doing okay. And Lethargos began to whisper to him the same sweet poison he had whispered to his guardian angel. For you have earned this rest. You have done enough. There is no need to strive so hard anymore. Your neighbor can handle the community's problems. You can skip your prayers tonight. God understands you are tired. This small compromise, this tiny indulgence, asterisk the man, feeling the pleasant weight of his own success, listened. He began to cut small corners. He became less generous, less vigilant in his own spiritual life. He chose comfort over calling. The great light of his potential did not go out in a storm. It slowly, quietly dimmed, starved by the slow poison of complacency. He was still a good man, but his destiny, the great fire he was meant to be, was reduced to a flickering candle, and a creeping darkness on earth, which he was meant to hold back, began to pool in the shadows, unopposed. Zuriel, lost in his daydreams of war, felt it a sudden, piercing cold, a spiritual void where a bright light should have been. He snapped his consciousness back to his post, his heart, the core of his angelic being, lurching with a terror he hadn't felt in the face of 1,000 demons. He looked at the silent gate. It was still standing, but its light was now a sickly pale yellow. The hum of the cosmos was wrong. There was a new, sour note of despair in it, and when he focused his senses on the mortal soul he was meant to be protecting, he found only a dimming ember, its divine potential guttering out, its destiny stolen. The horror of his failure crashed down upon him. This was not a glorious defeat in battle. There was no honor in it. He had not been overpowered by a mighty foe. He had been defeated by a whisper, by his own pride, by his boredom, by the arrogant belief that a small duty was beneath him. He had been so focused on the memory of his past victories that he had allowed a catastrophic, silent defeat to happen right under his nose. He saw it all in a flash of terrible clarity. Michael's warning, the test of humility he had failed, the insidious nature of the true enemy. The enemy was not chaos, but entropy, not hatred, but apathy, not the roaring demon, but the comforting whisper that says, "It is okay to stop trying." Despair, cold and absolute, washed over him. This was a failure far deeper than any physical wound. It was a stain on his very essence. Jaffin could have shattered his physical form, and he would have reformed his spirit intact. But Lethargos had done something far worse. He had revealed a rot within Zuriel's own spirit. He had used Zuriel's own strength, his own pride, against him. The shame was a physical weight, heavier than any mountain, his radiant wings. Once his glory, now felt like monuments to his arrogance. They drooped, their light fading to a dull, stony gray. He fell to his knees before the corrupted gate, the triumphant warrior reduced to a shattered monument of failure, and in that moment of absolute despair, a new whisper entered his mind. It was not the gentle, coaxing voice of Lethargos. It was a sharp, venomous hiss. Fey, you are a failure. You are worthless. You have betrayed your post, your commander, your god. There is no redemption for this. The only honorable thing left is to fade away, disperse your essence into the void. In this shame, Lethargos planted the seed of apathy, and now the fruit was despair, the final self-inflicted blow. Zuriel believed it. He saw the logic in it. His pride, which had soared so high, now demanded his utter annihilation. He could not bear to exist as this broken, shamed thing. He began to will his own end, to loosen the bonds that held his angelic form together. The light of his being began to flicker, lower than he had ever been, broken, defeated, and ready to cease existing. And it was here, in this place of absolute darkness, that something unexpected happened. Having lost everything, his pride, his honor, his sense of self, he was finally empty, and into that emptiness another voice spoke. It was not a whisper, and it was not a command. It was a memory of a truth he had spoken, but had not an asterisk in his moment of triumph. It had been a hollow boast. Now, in his moment of utter defeat, it became a desperate prayer. An instrument cannot function on its own. An instrument that thinks it is the musician is useless. His strength had never been his own. His victories were not his accomplishments. They were channels of a power that flowed from a source beyond him. His pride had clogged that channel. His complacency had rusted it shut. He realized that at the peak of his power, basking in the glow of his victory, he had been completely spiritually blind. He was self-reliant, arrogant, and utterly vulnerable. Here, at the absolute bottom, stripped of all pride and self-reliance, for the first time in millennia, he was truly open. Open to grace, open to a strength that was not his own. He was weak. He was a failure. He was nothing, and slowly, painfully, he rejected the venom of despair. He stood up, his form still dim, his wings still heavy. He did not feel strong or powerful. He felt fragile, broken, but he also felt a sliver of something new, purpose, not the grand, glorious purpose of a celebrated warrior, but the quiet, humble purpose of a penitent. He turned his back on the memories of his past glories, and faced the ugly reality that destiny was lost. The darkness on earth that he had failed to prevent would now rise. But he could fight it. Not as a celebrated champion seeking adoration, but as a humble guardian who now understood the true nature of the war. His war was not against legions in the void. His war was now against Lethargos, against the whisper of apathy, the rust of idleness, the subtle poison of good enough. It was a war he would have to fight first within himself, and then in the quiet, forgotten corners of the cosmos where souls were not being attacked, but were simply, quietly dimming. He went to Michael. He did not offer excuses or justifications. He stood before the archangel, his light diminished, and confessed his failure in its entirety. He recounted the whispers, his pride, his inattention. He expected to be cast out, to be stripped of his name and rank. Michael listened, his ancient eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound sorrow. "You have finally met a real enemy, Zuriel," the archangel said, his voice soft. "Not a creature of rage, but a creature of entropy. You have learned that a warrior's greatest test is not the heat of battle, but the cold of peace." "I have failed," Zuriel said, his voice cracking. "I am not worthy." "No," Michael corrected him gently. "You were not worthy before, when you believed you were. Your pride made you a liability. Your victory made you weak. Now that you are broken, now that you understand your own insufficiency, now you might just be useful." Michael did not restore him to his former glory. He did not give him back a shining sword and a place on the front lines. He gave him back the silence. "Your post remains," Michael commanded. "The gate is now your responsibility, not as a punishment, but as your purpose. You know its weakness because you are its weakness. Guard it. not with the memory of your strength, but with the knowledge of your fragility. Zuriel returned to the quiet, lonely outpost, but it was different now. The silence was no longer maddeningly empty. It was full. It was full. He could hear the faint, subtle whispers of Lethargos all across the cosmos, tempting other souls, other guardians, with the same sweet poison of complacency. He no longer paced with restless energy. He sat still and silent, his entire being focused on the duty at hand. He did not daydream of past glories. His past was a painful but necessary scar, a reminder of the cost of pride. It was not the blazing, fiery light of a triumphant star. It was the soft, steady, watchful light of a lighthouse, burning in the quiet darkness, guarding against the unseen dangers. He became the master of the small things, the constant reinforcement of the wards, the ceaseless vigilance, the humility to know that no duty was beneath him, that the smallest task was as vital as the greatest battle. He had learned the hardest lesson a warrior can learn, that the most dangerous moment is not when the enemy is at the gates, but when you believe there is no enemy at all. If you find this story of Zuriel's struggle and redemption resonating with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more content that delves into the hidden battles of the soul. Your support helps us continue to explore these profound truths. Zuriel's story is an end. It is a warning against the most deceptive of all spiritual and psychological traps, the plateau of comfort. We fight so hard to get out of our valleys, our rock-bottom moments. We claw our way up the mountain, and when we finally reach a place where the path levels out, where we can catch our breath, where things are finally okay, we are tempted to stop. We think we've arrived, the job is stable, the relationship, there are no major crises on the horizon. We are not in the abyss, therefore we must be safe. But this is the place where Lethargos does his finest work. This is the silent gate. It's the moment you stop actively growing because you feel you've grown enough. It is the moment you stop questioning, stop striving, stop pushing, because your current situation is acceptable. It is the moment your spiritual life moves from a passionate... You stop wrestling with Scripture and start skimming it. You stop fighting your own inner demons with vigilance and start making peace treaties with them. You call it balance or maturity. But it is, in reality, a slow, creeping spiritual sleep. Rock bottom is a terrifying place, but it has one great advantage: it is honest. When you are broken, you know you are broken. You are forced to confront your weakness. Desperation is a powerful fuel for growth and a catalyst for true reliance on God. You don't have the luxury of pride at rock bottom. You are stripped bare. But on the plateau of okayness, you are wrapped in the warm blankets of self-satisfaction. You are not desperate, so you do not cry out for help with the same urgency. You are not in obvious pain, so you do not seek the healer. You believe you are standing still. But in the spiritual realm, there is no standing still. There is only moving toward the light or drifting into shadow. Complacency is not a state of rest. It is a slow, imperceptible drift. Zuriel's story teaches us that vigilance is not just for wartime. It is for peacetime. In fact, it is most necessary in peacetime. It is the humility to know that yesterday's victory does not guarantee today's safety. It is the discipline to do the small things, the unseen things that reinforce your spiritual wards. It's the choice to pray even when you don't feel like it, to be generous when it's inconvenient, to choose the harder right over the easier wrong, especially when no one is watching. It is the conscious rejection of the whisper that says you've done enough. Where are your silent gates? Where are the areas you have become comfortable, complacent, and convinced that you are doing okay? Is it your career, your relationships, your faith, your personal growth? These areas of comfort are not your safe havens. They are your new front lines. They are the places where a silent, subtle enemy is probing for weakness, for the hairline cracks in your vigilance. It is when you are so comfortable you have forgotten to speak to him at all. True spiritual strength is not a monument built from past victories. It is a garden that must be tended to every single day, lest the weeds of apathy and pride choke out the life within. Be grateful for the plateaus, for the moments of peace, but do not fall asleep there. Use them as a place to rest, but not to reside. Reinforce your wards, sharpen your blade, because the greatest wars are won not with a bang, but with the quiet, daily, humble refusal to listen to the whisper that tells you the fight is over. That is all for today's video. If you like this video, please subscribe, like it, and support us. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.